paralyzed Korean Mafia boss was thrown from a cliff. What his black maid did next shocked everyone. The wind came first. It rushed up from the gorge like a living thing, sharp, wet, howling through pine and stone, slamming into Hannah's chest so hard she staggered backward. Her breath caught. Below her, the cliff dropped into darkness so deep it swallowed sound itself. No birds, no insects, just the echo of wind tearing through rock. And far below, something lay twisted among the stones. For one impossible second, her mind refused to shape what she was seeing. The world tilted, blurred, tried to protect her. Then the moonlight struck metal. A wheel, bent inward, snapped like a broken limb. Her knees gave way. "No," she whispered, the word barely surviving the wind. "No, please." She ran. The path down the cliff was narrow, meant only for maintenance crews, gravel and loose dirt sliding beneath her feet as she stumbled, clawing at branches, tearing her stockings. She didn't feel the pain. She barely felt her lungs burning as she gasped for air that refused to come fast enough. All she could think was his name, Kang Joon-suk. When she reached him, she fell to the ground beside his body so hard the impact rattled her bones. He lay on his side, motionless. Blood streaked his temple, dark against pale skin. His wheelchair, custom-built, reinforced, expensive beyond reason, was shattered several feet away, one wheel still turning slowly, uselessly. Hannah pressed trembling fingers to his throat. A pulse, weak, uneven, alive. A sob tore out of her before she could stop it. She clapped a hand over her mouth, forcing the sound back into her chest, her eyes burning. "Oh, God," she breathed silently. "Oh, God, please." She slipped off her coat and pressed it beneath his head, her hands moving automatically, trained by years of surviving crisis by becoming very, very still inside. She checked his breathing, his pupils, his legs, still useless, unmoving, as they had been for years, but now terrifyingly vulnerable. Above them, voices echoed. Male voices. Laughter. "Check the edge again," someone shouted. "Make sure." Hannah froze. Her body curved instinctively over Joon-suk's, shielding him, as if a thin frame could stop bullets or gravity or the cruelty of men who had decided he was no longer useful. Footsteps crunched closer. Her heart slammed against her ribs so violently she was sure they could hear it. She lowered her face to his ear and whispered, her lips barely moving, "Don't die. Please. If you die, they win." The footsteps paused. A flashlight beam cut across the rocks above them, sweeping, searching. Hannah didn't breathe. Seconds stretched into eternity. The light moved on. The voices faded. Only then did she collapse, pressing her forehead against the cold earth, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. This was not how the night was supposed to end. 3 hours earlier, the mansion had been quiet in the way expensive places often were, silent not because no one lived there, but because noise was forbidden. Hannah liked the quiet. It meant she could exist without being noticed. She folded laundry in the west wing, the scent of fresh detergent clinging to her fingers. Outside, the city lights of Seoul glittered beyond the high windows, distant and unreachable, like another life she once belonged to. She had worked here for 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days. She knew because she counted. Counting made time behave. She had arrived with nothing but a single suitcase and a reference letter that was half true and half miracle. She hadn't known whose house it was until the gates closed behind her, and she saw the crest carved into stone, an emblem whispered about in markets and docks and late-night warnings. Kang. Everyone in the city knew the name. They said Kang Joon-suk had been ruthless even before the accident. That after betrayal stole his legs, it stole his mercy too. That he ruled from his wheelchair like a king on a throne of shadows. Hannah had expected a monster. Instead, she found a man who drank his tea without sugar and watched the koi pond every morning as if it held answers. "You're from Nigeria," he said the first time they spoke. She had nearly dropped the teacup. "Yes, sir." "You moved well," he observed, quietly. She didn't know whether that was praise or warning. "Sit," he added unexpectedly, gesturing to the chair across from him. She hesitated. "So, you look like you're waiting for permission to exist," he said calmly. "Sit." That was a day her life bent, just slightly, in a direction she did not yet understand. The voices in the study were louder than usual. Hannah heard them even through the thick doors as she carried a tray of folded shirts down the corridor. She slowed, instinct sharpening. Men raised their voices around Kang Jun-suk only when they were desperate or foolish. "You think I'm blind?" Jun-suk's voice cut through, low and even. "I know exactly where the money went." Another voice laughed, harsh, disrespectful. "You should be thanking us. Without us, you'd be nothing but a cripple in a chair." Hannah's fingers tightened around the tray. She took one step closer. A scraping sound followed, metal against wood. Her stomach dropped. The doors burst open moments later. Two men emerged, faces flushed, eyes wild. Between them, Jun-suk sat rigid in his wheelchair, his jaw tight, blood already trickling from a split at his hairline. Their eyes met. In his gaze, Hannah saw something she had never seen before. Not rage. Fear. He said nothing, but the message struck her like a blow. "Help me." Then they were gone, wheels rattling violently down the hall. Hannah stood frozen, her heart pounding so loud she barely heard the distant sound of engines starting. She knew, then, that if she stayed still, he would die now. Crouched beside his broken body at the bottom of a cliff, Hannah faced a truth she could no longer deny. The quiet maid had ended tonight. She tore strips from her underskirt and bound his head, her hand surprisingly steady. She scanned the area, memorizing shadows, pathways, angles. She dragged him, inch by inch, toward a shallow rock overhang, using leverage, breath, stubborn will. Her arm screamed. Her back burned. She didn't stop. When headlights swept the cliff face again, she pressed herself against him, covering his mouth gently but firmly, her own lungs screaming for air. They passed. When silence returned, Hannah finally allowed herself to cry, but only for a moment, because survival demanded movement. She hoisted his arm over her shoulder, whispering to him even though he was unconscious, telling him stories, promises, lies, anything to keep herself going. "I'm not leaving you," she murmured. "I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. You trusted me." The words surprised her with their truth. By the time dawn broke pale and uncertain over the mountains, Hannah had made her decision. She would not take him to a hospital. She would not call the police. She would disappear with him, and whatever hunted Kang Jun-suk would have to come through her first. As sunlight crept across the rocks, Hannah lifted her face to the sky, blood on her hands, resolve in her bones. Behind her, far above, Soul continued breathing, unaware that its most dangerous man was no longer dead, and that the woman who saved him would become something far more dangerous than anyone expected. Hannah did not remember deciding to move again. She only remembered motion, her body obeying something older than thought. Survival had a rhythm, and she fell into it the way one falls into prayer. The forest thinned as dawn lifted its pale head above the ridge. Birds began to stir, their calls tentative, as if asking permission to exist after the night's violence. Hannah followed the narrow service trail that snaked away from the cliff, her arm locked beneath Jun-suk's shoulders, her breath counting her steps. 1, 2, 3. Don't fall. 4, 5. Don't stop. His weight dragged against her, heavier than it should have been, not just flesh and bone, but the gravity of who he was. The man people feared, the man men had tried to erase. She had no car, no phone she dared turn on, only a memory. The fishing shack by the river had belonged to no one for years. She knew because she had once slept there herself, during her first winter in Seoul, when the agency delayed her placement and the city taught her how cold loneliness could be. It was hidden behind reeds and crooked willow trees, accessible only by footpath and luck. Luck, Hannah suspected, had already run out. By the time she reached the shack, the sun was high enough to burn the fog from the water. Her arms trembled violently as she lowered Jun-suk onto the narrow cot inside. The shack smelled of damp wood and rusted iron, but the roof was intact and the door still locked. She slid the bolt home and sagged against it, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, knees drawn to her chest. Only then did the shaking come. Her entire body convulsed, breath hitching in painful jerks. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth, biting down until she tasted blood, refusing to make a sound. "You can fall apart later," she told herself. Later. Not now. Jun-suk groaned softly. The sound snapped her back into motion. She was at his side in an instant, her hands hovering, unsure where to touch. His face was pale beneath the bruising, lashes dark against his cheeks. She brushed damp hair from his forehead and checked his breathing again. Still alive, she exhaled slowly, deliberately, forcing her heart to match the rhythm. The shack had no electricity, but she found what she needed: an old lantern, a jug of water left behind by fishermen, a tattered first-aid kit whose contents were mostly expired but better than nothing. She cleaned his wounds carefully, murmuring apologies each time he flinched. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know it hurts. I know." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. She wrapped his head, checked his ribs, his arms, his legs, unchanged, still unresponsive below the waist. That part did not frighten her. It was familiar to him. What frightened her was a stillness in his chest between breaths, the way his lips sometimes parted as if he were trying to speak and couldn't. She sat beside him as the morning wore on, exhaustion pressing down like a weight. At some point, she must have drifted into sleep. She woke to the sound of movement. Her eyes flew open, heart leaping into her throat, but it was only June-Suk shifting, his fingers curling weakly against the blanket she had pulled over him. "Hannah," he said hoarsely. Relief hit her so hard she laughed, a broken, tearful sound, and then she was crying, pressing her hands against his chest as if to anchor him to the world. "I'm here," she said quickly. "You're safe. Please don't try to move." His eyes searched her face, sharp even through pain. "Where?" "Somewhere hidden," she replied. "Don't worry about it." He frowned faintly. "You shouldn't have." "Don't," she said, more firmly than she intended. She swallowed and softened her tone. "Please, save your strength." Silence stretched between them, thick with things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, he spoke. "They wanted me dead." "I know. They'll look for my body." Her fingers stilled on the bandage. "Then they won't find it." Something unreadable flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or something like awe. "You understand what you've done?" "Yes," she said quietly. "You've made yourself a target." She met his gaze without flinching. "I've been a target my whole life." That shut him up. Days passed in a strange, suspended state. Hannah ventured out only at dawn and dusk, moving carefully, listening constantly. She bartered for supplies at a riverside market 2 villages away, using cash she had hidden for emergencies. She avoided faces she recognized. She learned which fishermen asked no questions. Back at the shack, she tended to June-Suk with a diligence that bordered on reverence. She cleaned him, fed him broth, coaxed him to drink water even when he grimaced. He watched her constantly. "You're not afraid of me," he said one evening, as rain began to drum against the roof. "I was," she admitted. "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I know you bleed." A quiet, humorless laugh escaped him. "That obvious." She smiled faintly. At night, when he slept, Hannah sat by the window and allowed herself to remember. She remembered Lagos, the heat, the noise, the chaos and beauty of it. She remembered the night she ran, the reason she never spoke of, the way fear could turn a person invisible if they let it. She had let it. Until now, on the 5th night, footsteps approached the shack. Hannah stiffened instantly, her hand flying to the small knife she kept hidden in her sleeve. She extinguished the lantern and pressed herself against the wall, listening. A soft knock sounded. "Hannah," a woman's voice called, accented, cautious. "It's Mirela." Hannah exhaled in a rush and opened the door just enough to let the woman slip inside. Mirela was broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, her dark hair braided tightly down her back. She took one look at June-Suk and swore under her breath. "So it's true," she murmured. "The king lives." "Not here," Hannah said sharply. Mirela raised her hands. "Relax." No one followed me. They spoke quickly, urgently. Mirela promised medicine, news, discretion. In return, she asked only one thing. "How long can you keep him hidden?" Hannah looked at June-Suk, at the man who had once owned half the city and now relied on her to turn him in bed. "As long as it takes," she said. That night, after Mirela left, June-Suk spoke again. "You didn't have to do this. he said quietly. I know, Hannah replied. I chose to. Why? She sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. Because, she said, after a long moment, someone once left me to die, and I promised myself I would never be that person. He reached out then, his fingers brushing hers, not demanding, not commanding, asking. She let him hold her hand. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper, and for the first time since the cliff, Hannah allowed herself to believe that survival might not be the only thing waiting for her. Something else was growing in the quiet. Something dangerous. Something tender. The river changed its voice at night. During the day, it laughed, bright, careless, skipping over stones like a child with nowhere else to be. At night, it deepened into something older, slower. The water slid past the shack with a low, constant murmur, as if telling secrets only the dark could keep. Hannah listened to it as she washed a bowl at the small basin outside. The moon was thin, pale as bone. Her reflection wavered on the water's surface, breaking apart with each ripple. She did not recognize the woman staring back at her. Her hands were rough now. Her shoulders ached constantly. There were shadows beneath her eyes that no amount of rest could touch. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, there was something new. Stillness. Purpose. Inside the shack, Kang Jun-suk lay awake, listening to her movements. He knew her footsteps now, the soft scrape of her shoe on wood, the faint hitch in her breathing when she thought no one could hear. He had been many things in his life, feared, obeyed, hated, but never helpless in this way, never dependent. And yet, when she entered, carrying the bowl of soup, the tightness in his chest eased. You should sleep, he said quietly. So should you. I can't. She set the bowl down and studied his face, reading the tension in his jaw, the distant look in his eyes. Night, Maze. He didn't answer right away. They come when I close my eyes, he admitted at last. The moment before. She nodded slowly. Then don't close them yet. She sat beside him, close enough that their knees brushed. He noticed a faint scent of soap on her skin, the warmth she carried in with her like a living thing. You never told me what happened, she said gently. Before, to your legs. A muscle jumped in his cheek. Do you want to know? He asked, or do you feel obligated to? I want to know. Silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. It was my brother, he said. Not by blood, by loyalty. Hannah did not interrupt. He wanted what I had, Jun-suk continued, but he didn't want to earn it. So he sold me, set up the ambush, made sure the bullet hit my spine. Her breath caught softly. I lived, he went on. He didn't expect that. But in this world, survival is sometimes worse than death. It leaves you unfinished. Hannah thought of the cliff, the betrayal in the study, the fear she had seen in his eyes. You still trusted people, she said quietly. I trusted the wrong ones. She reached for his hand without thinking, her fingers wrapping around his. His skin was warm, calloused. Then trust me, she said. His gaze lifted to hers, sharp and searching. That's a dangerous thing to ask. I know, she replied. I'm still asking. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he squeezed her hand. Outside, a branch snapped. Hannah stiffened instantly, every nerve flaring. She rose in one fluid motion, knife already in her hand. Stay here, she whispered. She slipped outside, her movement silent, controlled. The forest loomed around her, shadows layered upon shadows. The river whispered on. Hannah, a voice murmured from the trees. Mirela stepped into the moonlight, her expression tight. We have a problem, she said. Inside, Jun-suk waited, his heart pounding, not with fear for himself, but for the woman who had walked into danger without hesitation. When Hannah returned, her face was grave. They are searching the riverbanks, she said, quietly, asking questions, offering money. How long? Jun-suk asked. Days, Mirela replied. Maybe less. Hannah met Jun-suk's gaze. We can't stay here. He nodded once. I know a place. She blinked. You said you had nowhere left. I said I had no one left, he corrected softly. There's a difference. The journey was dangerous. They traveled at night, moving through back roads and forgotten paths. Mirela drove, her eyes sharp, her mouth set. Hannah sat beside Junsuk in the back, her arm steady around his shoulders whenever the road jolted. At one point, exhaustion claimed her. She dozed, her head tipping against him. He froze. No one had leaned on him like that in years. The simple weight of her trust sent something sharp and aching through his chest. He did not move until she woke. The place he took them to was an old riverside warehouse, long abandoned. Hidden rooms, multiple exits, a fortress for ghosts. Hannah surveyed it carefully. "It'll do," she said. He smiled faintly. High praise. Days blurred together again, but the tension sharpened. They were closer now. Forced proximity stripped away pretense. Hannah helped him dress, bathe, stretch muscles that had long ago learned to endure pain in silence. At first, she kept her eyes averted, her touch purely functional. Over time, that changed, not into anything improper, just human. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through a cracked window, Hannah laughed at something Mirela said. The sound startled Junsuk. It was warm, unguarded, beautiful. He watched her as if seeing her for the first time. "That night," he spoke. "When this is over," he said quietly, "you should leave." Her hand stilled on the blanket she was folding. "Leave." "This world will come for me again," he said. "It always does. You deserve a life untouched by it." She turned slowly. "You don't get to decide that for me. I'm trying to protect you." "So am I," she shot back, "from becoming someone who pushes people away out of fear." The words hung between them, heavy and true. "I chose this," she said more softly. "I chose you." His breath caught. Before he could respond, a sound echoed through the warehouse, the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. Mirela swore. "They found us," she said. Hannah's heart raced, but her voice was steady. "Then we move." Junsuk looked at her, at the woman who had stepped into his darkness and refused to be swallowed. "Stay close," he said. "I always do." As footsteps approached and shadows lengthened, one truth settled deep in both of them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The warehouse went silent in the way prey goes silent, every sound swallowed, every breath measured. Hannah felt it first in her spine, that prickle that said you were no longer alone. Mirela moved fast, killing the lights with a flick. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by thin bands of moonlight slicing through high windows. "Free," Mirela whispered. "Maybe four." Junsuk's hands tightened on the arms of his wheelchair. His mind was already calculating angles, exits, timing. Paralysis had taken his legs, not his command. "Hannah," he said softly, "listen to me." She crouched beside him, her eyes sharp, focused. "I'm listening." "If things go wrong," he continued, "you leave, you don't look back." Her jaw clenched. "We are not doing this again." "Hannah." "No," she said, quiet but absolute. "You don't get to decide who I abandon." Footsteps echoed closer. Gravel shifted. A door creaked. Mirela raised 2 fingers, then one. "Now." The first man stepped inside, gun raised. Hannah moved. She struck his wrist with the heel of her hand, twisting hard. The gun clattered to the floor. Mirela slammed him into the wall before he could recover. A second man lunged from the side. Junsuk's voice cut through the chaos. "Left!" Hannah ducked just as the man swung. She felt the rush of air, the heat of his body passing too close. She drove her knee up hard, knocking the breath from him, then twisted away as Mirela fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Enough!" Mirela barked. "Drop it." The remaining men froze. One of them laughed softly. "So the rumors were true," he said. "The maid stayed." Hannah's blood went cold. "You should have stayed invisible," he continued. "Now you're just another loose end." Before she could react, a hand seized her from behind, an arm locking around her throat. "Hannah!" Junsuk shouted. The man pressed a gun to her temple. "One move," he said, And she? Let her go, Jun-suk said. The command was calm. Deadly, the man scoffed. And why would I listen to a cripple? Jun-suk leaned forward slightly in his chair. In the dim light, his eyes burned. Because, he said evenly, the men you answer to are already finished. You just don't know it yet. The man hesitated. Hannah used that moment. She stomped hard on his foot, drove her elbow back into his ribs, and wrenched free as a gun discharge, the shot ringing harmlessly into the rafters. Mirela didn't hesitate. The man went down. Silence followed, ragged, stunned. Hannah staggered, chest heaving. Jun-suk rolled to her side instantly, his hands gripping her arms, checking her face, her neck. Are you hurt? His voice shook despite his control. She swallowed, nodding. I'm fine. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jun-suk pulled her into him. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't dramatic. It was instinct. Hannah froze, then slowly relaxed, her forehead resting against his shoulder, her fingers curling into his shirt. She could feel his heart racing beneath the fabric. So much for leaving, she murmured weakly. His breath brushed her hair. I never wanted to. Mirela cleared her throat pointedly. I hate to ruin the moment, but we need to disappear. Now. They burned the warehouse before dawn. Not literally, but enough to erase themselves. They scattered evidence, split paths, abandoned everything that could be traced. By the time the sun rose, they were already miles away, heading north toward the coast. The safe house was smaller this time. A modest apartment overlooking gray water and gulls. Anonymous, ordinary, perfect. Days passed. The adrenaline faded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Hannah slept deeply for the first time in weeks, her dreams mercifully quiet. When she woke, Jun-suk was watching her from the doorway, a cup of tea in his hand. You make noise when you dream, he said softly. She blinked, embarrassed. Bad habit. I don't mind, he replied. The words settled between them, intimating their simplicity. That evening, as the sun sank into the sea, Hannah stood on the balcony, wrapped in a sweater that smelled faintly like him. Jun-suk joined her, rolling to her side. Thank you, he said. For what? For staying, he replied. For choosing me when walking away would have been easier. She looked at him, really looked at him. The scars, the strength, the vulnerability he never showed anyone else. I didn't choose you because it was hard, she said. I chose you because it was right. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. This time, she didn't pretend it was just survival holding them together. It was something deeper now, something neither of them could walk away from. Outside, the sea whispered against the shore, carrying their secret forward into the dark. The sea never slept. Hannah learned this in the days that followed. Even when the sky was calm and the world felt briefly merciful, the water below the balcony shifted and sighed, restless, endless. At night, when the wind slid through the apartment and brushed her skin with cold fingers, she would wake to its voice and lie still, listening as if it were speaking directly to her. She had never lived anywhere like this before. Somewhere temporary but not desperate, quiet but not lonely. The apartment was sparse. White walls, a small kitchen, a living room that smelled faintly of salt and old wood. It felt borrowed, like a pause in a life rather than a destination. Jun-suk adapted faster than she expected. He learned the layout within hours, memorizing distances, angles. He refused help whenever possible, maneuvering his wheelchair with stubborn independence. Hannah let him. She understood pride. She also understood when to step in without being asked. In the mornings, she made tea the way he liked it. Strong, no sugar. He watched her from the table, his gaze following the practiced movements of her hands. You've done this for a long time, he said once. Taking care of people, she asked. Surviving, he replied. The words struck deeper than she expected. One afternoon, Mirela arrived with news and groceries. Her face was grim. They are tearing each other apart, she said. Your enemies are fighting over the vacuum you left. Jun-suk nodded slowly. Good. But, Mirela added, glancing at Hannah, they're asking about her. Hannah's shoulders stiffened. What kind of questions? Jun-suk asked, his voice dangerously calm. Where she came from, who she knew before you, why a maid would risk everything. Silence fell. Hannah felt suddenly exposed, as if the walls had thinned and the world outside could see straight through her. That ends. June-suk said flatly. Mirela raised an eyebrow. You sure? Because once men like that get curious. They stop, he interrupted, or they don't exist. Mirela studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll spread the word. When she left, the apartment felt heavier. Hannah busied herself in the kitchen, scrubbing an already clean counter, her thoughts spiraling. They are right, she said suddenly. It doesn't make sense. June-suk turned his chair toward her. What doesn't? That I stayed, she said, her back still to him. That I chose this. He watched the tension in her shoulders, the way she braced herself as if expecting judgment. Then tell me, he said gently, why did you? She swallowed. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, quietly, because I know what it feels like to be thrown away. She turned to face him at last, her eyes dark, unflinching. Hannah rose slowly to her feet. You made one mistake, she said. You thought I was a weakness. The door burst open. Mirela stood there, gun raised, eyes fierce. Let's go. They didn't run. They walked. Behind them, the empire that had tried to reclaim its king collapsed inward, devouring itself. June-suk waited in a secure command room several floors down, screens surrounding him. When Hannah entered, his breath caught visibly. He rolled forward, stopping just short of her. You're hurt, he said, scanning her. I'm here, she replied. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with a strength that surprised them both. She leaned into him, her forehead against his shoulder, the world finally quieting. I told you I'd come for you, he murmured. She smiled against him. You did. Sirens wailed in the distance. The city would talk about this night for years, about the fall of men who thought themselves untouchable, about the quiet return of a king who no longer ruled by fear alone. Later, as dawn crept over the skyline, June-suk and Hannah stood by a window together. This ends now, he said. I'm done letting the past decide my future. She took his hand. Then let's choose it. He turned to her fully. Stay. Not because you're needed, because you're wanted. Her eyes shone. Always. The city learned how to breathe again. It didn't happen all at once. Power never releases its grip willingly. It loosens finger by finger. In the weeks that followed the night everything fell apart, Seoul moved through a quiet recalibration. Accounts audited, names erased from directories, rumors settling into facts. Kang June-suk vanished. At least, that was the story. From a modest house overlooking a narrow inlet far from the city's glare, a different life took shape. One measured not by territory or fear, but by mornings and choices and the gentle discipline of healing. The house smelled of wood polish and sea air. It had wide doorways and low thresholds. Hannah chose it herself. You don't need to do this for me, June-suk had said when she showed him the place. I know, she replied. I'm doing it with you. He learned to live without the constant hum of threat. It took time. Some nights, his hands still clenched in his sleep, jaw tight with dreams he never fully shared. Hannah learned how to wake him gently, her palm warm on his chest, her voice steady. You're here, she would say. You're safe. And eventually, he believed her. Hannah changed too. She no longer moved like someone expecting to disappear. Her shoulders straightened. Her laughter came easier. She took a job at a community center nearby, teaching language classes to immigrants who reminded her of herself, lost, brave, standing on the edge of something unknown. One evening, as they watched the tide pull back from the shore, June-suk spoke. I used to think power meant control, he said, that if I could command enough fear, nothing could touch me. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. And now, he said softly, I think power is choosing who you protect, and letting yourself be seen. She smiled. You're getting wise. He huffed a quiet laugh. Don't tell anyone. The past didn't vanish completely. It never did, but it lost its teeth. June-suk invested quietly, legally, in businesses that rebuilt what others had broken. He paid debts that had nothing to do with money. He used his mind, his strategy, his patience, not to rule, but to repair. Hannah stood beside him through it all, not behind, not in front, equal. On the anniversary of the cliff, they returned to the mountains. The wind was calmer this time. The gorge still yawned wide and dark, but it no longer felt like an ending. Hannah stood at the edge, her fingers laced with his. "I was so afraid that night," she said. "Not of dying, of being alone." He squeezed her hand. "You aren't." She turned to him, her eyes shining. "Promise." He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a simple, reverent gesture. "I promise," he said, "as long as you choose me." She smiled, fierce and tender all at once. "I always will." Years later, people would tell the story wrong. They would talk about the paralyzed mafia boss who survived betrayal, about the fall of an empire, about a woman who shocked everyone by standing in the fire. They would miss the truth. That love didn't save him. She did, and in doing so, she saved herself too. The sea rolled on. The wind carried their laughter into the open sky. And the life they built, quiet, hard-won, and deeply human, endured. Thank you for listening to a paralyzed career mafia boss was thrown from a cliff. What his black maid did next shocked everyone. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world. Until next time, Red Heart Hash.